The smell of wet asphalt and stale formula clung to the inside of my nose, a sensory memory of exhaustion that refused to fade. It was late October in Seattle, the kind of damp, bone-chilling cold that seeped through the cracks of the window frame I had taped shut 3 days ago. The digital clock on the microwave, which only worked when I slammed the door just right, blinked 5:43 p.m. Outside, the sky was the color of a bruised plum, darkening rapidly into a suffocating black. I stared at the single envelope on the laminate counter, the red ink of the final notice stamp looking like a fresh wound against the white paper. The heater rattled, coughing out lukewarm air that smelled of burnt dust, mocking my attempt to keep the studio apartment habitable. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the lukewarm bottle of milk. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the cumulative vibration of 3 nights without more than 2 hours of sleep. Leo was shifting in his crib, the low, guttural whimper beginning to rise like a siren. I knew that sound. It was the prelude to a storm I didn't have the energy to weather. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the grit under my eyelids. I had $42.18 in my checking account. The rent was $1,800. The math was simple, brutal, and entirely impossible. I felt like I was treading water in the middle of the ocean, holding a 20-pound weight, waiting for my lungs to finally give out. Leo's whimper escalated into a full-blown scream, a piercing sound that shattered the fragile silence of the apartment. I moved instinctively, scooping him up before his cries could wake Mrs. Gable in 4B. She had already banged on the ceiling with a broom handle twice this week. "It's okay, buddy. I've got you," I whispered, my voice rasping like sandpaper. His forehead was hot against my neck, not fever hot, just the heat of distress. He arched his back, fighting my hold, his small fists bunching my stained t-shirt. The walls of the apartment felt like they were closing in, compressing the air until it was too thick to breathe. I couldn't stay here. If I stayed, I would break. I needed space. I needed the numbness of the cold. I grabbed my coat, a thrift store peacoat with a missing button, and wrapped Leo in his blue fleece blanket. I didn't even lock the door properly. There was nothing inside worth stealing anyway. We hit the street, the cold air slapping my face, shocking my system awake. I walked with a desperate, hurried pace toward Harborview Park, 6 blocks away. I kept my head down, counting the cracks in the sidewalk, trying to ignore the gnawing hunger in my stomach. I had skipped lunch to save the last of the bread for tomorrow. I should have asked for that overtime shift at the warehouse, but I couldn't afford the sitter. Every choice was a trap, and every trap cost money I didn't have. Harborview Park was usually empty at this hour, a desolate stretch of dying grass and rusted playground equipment overlooking the grey chop of the Puget Sound. But tonight, the atmosphere felt heavy, charged with static electricity. I sat on the damp wooden bench facing the water, rocking Leo rhythmically. The wind whipped off the bay carrying the scent of brine and diesel fuel. Leo was still sobbing, his little chest hitching with every breath. "Shh, Leo, please," I begged, the desperation leaking into my tone. I checked my watch, a scratched Timex I'd bought for $20. It was 6:15 p.m. The park lights flickered on, casting long, sinister shadows across the gravel path. That's when the black SUVs arrived. There were 3 of them, massive Cadillac Escalades with tinted windows so dark they looked like voids in reality. They pulled up to the curb 50 yards away, their engines purring with a low, menacing rumble. I froze, my protective instinct flaring. This wasn't a neighborhood for luxury cars. This was where drug deals happened, or where people like me came to hide from their failures. 4 men stepped out first. They were large, wearing charcoal suits that cost more than my entire life's earnings. They didn't look like cops. They moved with a synchronized precision, scanning the perimeter, their hands hovering near their waistbands. One of them, a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow, looked directly at me. I tightened my grip on Leo, ready to bolt. Then, the rear door of the middle vehicle opened. The woman who emerged commanded the air around her to still. She was Japanese, perhaps in her early 50s, though her skin was like porcelain, untouched by the stress that etched lines into people like me. She wore a long, structured coat of midnight blue cashmere, the collar turned up against the wind. Underneath, I caught a glimpse of a silk blouse in a shade of crimson that looked disturbingly like fresh blood. She didn't walk. She glided, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement with a rhythm that sounded like a gavel striking a judge's bench. Her hair was a sleek, sharp bob, jet black without a single strand out of place, but it was her eyes that terrified me. Even from this distance, under the flickering halogen street lamp, they were dark, abyssal pools that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. She stopped near the railing, staring out at the water, flanked by her guards. She looked like royalty inspecting a kingdom she intended to burn down. I felt like an intruder in a scene I wasn't meant to witness. I wanted to leave, but Leo let out a fresh, piercing wail. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. The guards turned instantly, their bodies shifting into combat stances. The woman didn't flinch. She just turned her head slowly, her gaze locking onto us. My heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm sorry," I muttered to the empty air, terrified. Leo wouldn't stop. I had to calm him down. Panic rose in my throat. If he kept crying, they might come over. They might think we were a threat or a nuisance to be removed. I did the only thing that ever worked. I buried my face in Leo's soft hair and began to hum. It was a melody Emmy had taught me weeks before the cancer took her, a Japanese lullaby she said her grandmother used to sing in Osaka. I didn't know the words perfectly, but I knew the tune. It was haunting, in a minor key, sounding more like a mourning song than a comfort for a child. I closed my eyes, shutting out the scary men in suits, shutting out the woman with the dangerous eyes. I sang softly at first, my baritone voice trembling. "Nenen korori-yo, okorori-yo." The words felt heavy on my tongue, alien yet familiar. I rocked Leo, feeling his body slowly relax. The tension left his small shoulders. I grew slightly louder, desperate to keep him quiet, losing myself in the memory of Emmy's voice. I imagined her singing it, imagined we were a family again, safe in a warm house, not shivering on a park bench in the dark. Boya wa yoikoda nenishina. I sang the second verse, the one Emmy said was rare, a variation from a specific village that didn't exist anymore. I poured my grief into the notes, the vibration of my chest soothing my son. I didn't know then that my voice was carrying across the wind. I didn't know that the air in the park had gone deathly silent. I finished the verse and opened my eyes, expecting to be alone, expecting the scary people to have ignored the crazy man singing to his kid. I was wrong. The woman was standing 5 feet away from me. I gasped, jerking back, clutching Leo tight. I hadn't heard her approach. She had moved with the silence of a ghost. Her guards were behind her, tense, their hands inside their jackets, but she held up a gloved hand, halting them. Up close, she was even more intimidating. The scent of expensive jasmine perfume and cold rain rolled off her, but her face. The mask of stone had cracked. Her lips were parted slightly, trembling. Her eyes, previously void of emotion, were glistening. A single tear, stark and shocking, traced a path down her pale cheek. She looked at me, not with anger, but with a devastating mixture of horror and recognition. "That song," she whispered. Her voice was low, smoky, accented with a refined precision. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I was just trying to get him to sleep. We're leaving." I started to stand, my legs shaking. "Sit," she commanded. It wasn't shouted, but the authority in the single syllable slammed me back onto the bench. She took a step closer, her eyes searching my face, dissecting me. She looked at Leo, then back at me, her gaze intense enough to strip the skin from my bones. "Where did you learn that verse?" she asked, her voice wavering on the edge of control. "The second one, about the red dragonflies." "My wife," I stammered, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. "She taught it to me before she died." The woman's hand went to her chest, clutching the fabric of her coat over her heart. She looked as if I had just shot her. The wind howled around us, whipping her hair across her face, but she didn't blink. She stared at me as if I were a ghost. "Your wife," she repeated, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She leaned in, her face inches from mine. I could see the gold flecks in her dark irises. "That is impossible." "Why?" I asked, my fear momentarily eclipsed by confusion. She reached out, her gloved finger hovering inches from Leo's sleeping face, then retracted it as if afraid he would burn her. When she looked back at me, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by a terrifying steel-hard resolve. "Because," she said, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper that the wind carried straight into my soul. "That song was written by my father for me. He never wrote it down. He never sang it to anyone else." She paused, the silence stretching until it snapped. "And my father has been dead for 30 years. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a cold dread settle in the pit of my stomach. "Who are you?" I whispered. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the man with the scar. "Get the car," she ordered. "They are coming with us." "Wait, no," I protested, clutching Leo. "I'm not going anywhere with you." She looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw the monster beneath the elegance. It was a look that promised violence, but also salvation. "You have no choice," she said softly. "Because if you know that song, then the people who killed my father will be coming for you too." She extended a hand. "Get in the car, Julian." I froze. I hadn't told her my name. I looked at the dark SUVs, then down at my sleeping son, and finally back into the eyes of the woman who knew secrets that belonged to the dead. The first drop of heavy rain splattered against my cheek, signaling the storm had finally broken. I realized with a sinking heart that my life, the miserable, quiet struggle I knew, was over. I stood up. The heavy thud of the Cadillac Escalade's door severed my connection to the world. 1 second, I was breathing the wet, freezing air of a Seattle storm. The next, I was sealed inside a hermetic chamber of silence and aggressive luxury. The cabin smelled of conditioned leather and a faint, sharp citrus antiseptic that stung my nose. My thrift store pea coat, heavy with rain, dripped dark spots onto the pristine beige floor mats. I looked down at the stains, a stark visual map of how violently I had been ripped from my own life. I pressed my back against the door, putting every available inch of space between myself and the woman. She sat on the opposite bucket seat, her posture as rigid as a steel beam. She didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead at the partition separating us from the driver, her hands folded over the midnight blue cashmere of her coat. The vehicle began to move, not with a roar but with a low electromagnetic hum that vibrated through the soles of my wet sneakers. We glided over the potholes of the park entrance with a smoothness that felt unnatural. My heart was a trapped bird hammering against my ribs. I clutched Leo tighter to my chest. He shifted in his sleep, letting out a soft, contented sigh that sounded deafening in the quiet cabin. Every instinct I had, the primal urge of a father protecting his cub, screamed at me to open the door and tuck and roll. I should take my chances with the hypothermia and the dark. But logic, cold and razor-sharp, pinned me to the seat. She knew the song, she knew Emmy, and she had mentioned killers. "Where are you taking us?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, pathetic in the acoustic perfection of the car. The woman, Akiko I assumed, though she hadn't given me a name, didn't turn. She reached into the door panel and pressed a button. The tinted window beside me slid down an inch, letting in a burst of biting wind before sealing shut again. It was a demonstration of control. She commanded the environment. I merely existed in it. "To a place where the past cannot reach us quite so easily," she said. Her voice was low, textured with a lifetime of giving orders that were never refused. "You have questions, Julian, but right now my concern is the child. Is he sick?" "He's tired," I said defensively, pulling the fleece blanket up to Leo's chin. "And he's hungry. We were going home." "Home," she repeated, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. She finally turned her head. In the filtered amber light of the passing street lamps, her eyes were no longer filled with the tears I'd seen in the park. They were dry, dark, and calculating. They dissected me, cataloguing my poverty, my fear, and my exhaustion. "And where is home for the husband of Emi Sato?" The name landed like a physical blow. "Sato?" I frowned, confusion momentarily overriding the terror. "Emi's last name was Tanaka. She was an orphan from Osaka. She worked in a library." The woman let out a sound that was too sharp to be a laugh. She unbuttoned her coat, revealing a blouse of crimson silk that shimmered like fresh blood. "Tanaka," she said, shaking her head with disdain. "How uninspired. It is the Smith of Japan. She didn't even try." She leaned forward, the scent of expensive jasmine perfume invading my personal space. "You lived with a ghost for 5 years, Julian, and you never once thought to check if she cast a reflection." "I knew my wife," I snapped, anger flaring hot in my chest. "I knew who she was. She was kind, she was gentle, and she loved this boy more than anything. I don't care what name she was born with." "You should care," Akiko replied, her voice dropping to a granite hardness, "because the name Sato is the reason she is dead, and it is the reason you are sitting in this car instead of bleeding out on the pavement of Harborview Park." I stared at her, my mouth dry. "Emmy died of ovarian cancer. It was aggressive. We fought it for a year." "Cancer," she mused, leaning back into the leather. "A convenient tragedy, slow enough to allow for goodbyes, natural enough to avoid a police autopsy, efficient. My sister was many things, a liar, a traitor, a runaway, but she was not a woman who died of natural causes at 32. If she is dead, it is because she was found." Sister. The word hung in the air, heavy and impossible. I looked down at Leo, tracing the shape of his eyes, the curve of his nose. I looked back at Akiko. The resemblance was there, buried under layers of hardened armor, but undeniable. The high cheekbones, the fierce set of the jaw. "She never mentioned a sister," I whispered. "She said she had no one." "She had an empire," Akiko corrected, bitterness coating her words, and she walked away from it to play house with. She waved a manicured hand at me, dismissing my entire existence, with an American nobody. "I made her happy," I said, my voice trembling. "We were happy." "Happiness is a liability," she said. She reached into a hidden compartment and pulled out a crystal decanter and 2 heavy glasses. The car hit a bump, but her hand remained perfectly steady as she poured a measure of amber liquid. She held it out to me. "Drink. You look like you're going to pass out, and I don't carry men." I hesitated, then took the glass. My hand shook, the ice clinking a nervous rhythm against the crystal. I took a sip. It was scotch, smooth and smoky, burning a path of warmth through my chest. "My name is Akiko," she said, pouring a glass for herself. "And you, Julian, are a loose end. Loose ends in my world are usually cut." She took a long swallow, her eyes never leaving mine. "But you sang the song, the dragonfly song. That changes the calculus." "Why?" I asked. "It's just a lullaby. She sang it to Leo every night." "It is a cipher," Akiko said. "A code my father created for his private accounts. He sang it to us as children, so we would memorize the sequence without writing it down. If you know the second verse, you hold the keys to half the underworld banking in Tokyo." I stared at her, horrified. "I don't know any codes, I just know the melody. The words mean sleep, good child." "The melody is the map," she said. "And if anyone else finds out you know it, they will peel you apart to get it, and then they will peel him apart." She nodded toward Leo. The car began to accelerate, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. We were moving too fast for the wet roads, but no sirens followed us. I realized then that laws didn't apply to this woman. She didn't just break them, she hovered above them. Just then, a buzzing sound cut through the silence. Akiko pulled a phone from her pocket. It wasn't a smartphone, it was a sleek, black flip phone. She snapped it open. "Moshi, Moshi," she said. I tried to tune it out, focusing on the rhythmic rise and fall of Leo's chest, but the cadence of her speech caught my ear. Emmy had been adamant about language. "He needs to know where he comes from. Julian," she used to say. For the last 2 years of her life, she insisted we speak Japanese at dinner. I wasn't fluent, my grammar was clumsy, but I had a good ear. I understood more than I could speak. "Status?" Akiko asked in Japanese. The voice on the other end was tinny, unintelligible to me. Akiko listened, her face darkening. The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. Then she spoke rapidly, her voice low and venomous. "Kare o shori shiro soshite daremo no kosuna kirei ni." My stomach dropped. The whiskey turned to acid in my gut. Deal with him, and leave no one, cleanly. She snapped the phone shut and looked at me, her expression a perfect mask of indifference. Business, she said in English. Nothing for you to worry about. I tightened my grip on the whiskey glass until my knuckles turned white. I should have stayed silent. I should have played the dumb, frightened American. That was the safe play. But the thought of what she just ordered, the casual bureaucratic execution of violence, sparked something reckless in me. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was the realization that I was already in too deep to swim back. "Who are you dealing with?" I asked quietly. Akiko paused, her glass halfway to her lips. She lowered it slowly. "Excuse me?" I looked up, meeting her gaze head on. "You told them to deal with him, to leave no one, to do it cleanly." I spoke the words in English, but I mimicked the specific, cold intonation she had used on the word cleanly. Kireni. Silence descended on the car, heavier than before. The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The bodyguard in the front seat shifted, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. Akiko didn't signal them. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, the first crack in her composure since the park. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, reassessing me completely. It felt like she was looking at a dull rock and suddenly noticing a vein of gold. "You speak Japanese," she stated. "Emmy taught me," I said, holding her gaze. "She made us speak it at dinner, every night." Akiko sat back, a slow exhale escaping her lips. She looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't fear, but it was respect, or perhaps calculation. "She taught you the Osaka dialect," she murmured, the way she spoke when she was angry. "You have her cadence." "I know what Shorishiro means, Akiko," I said, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "I know. You just ordered a hit." "A cleanup," she corrected, her voice losing its condescending edge. "There is a difference." She took another sip of her drink, watching me over the rim of the glass. "You are full of surprises, Julian, a poor single father who wears a coat with missing buttons, yet you carry the key to a fortune in your head and speak the language of the Yakuza at my dinner table." "I'm not part of your world," I said. "I'm just a guy trying to keep his kid fed." "Competence is rare," she said, ignoring my protest. "Most men in your situation would be weeping or begging for mercy. You are listening. You are translating. You are paying attention." She swirled the ice in her glass. "Perhaps Emmy saw something in you other than a safe harbor. Perhaps she saw a soldier." "I'm not a soldier," I said, looking away. "I'm a warehouse inventory manager. Or I was, until I missed my shift today." The mention of the warehouse brought the crushing reality of my life back into focus. The adrenaline was fading, leaving room for the panic of poverty to return. Leo shifted again, letting out a hungry cry. He rooted against my chest, looking for a bottle I didn't have. I instinctively patted my coat pocket, checking for the emergency pacifier. My hand brushed against the sharp corner of the envelope I had stuffed there before leaving the apartment. The final notice. The paper felt like it was burning a hole through the damp wool. Leo cried out louder this time, his face scrunching up in distress. "He's hungry," I muttered, panic rising. I didn't bring the bag. We left in a hurry." Akiko watched me struggle to soothe him. Her gaze dropped to my pocket, where the corner of the red-stamped envelope was sticking out. "There is nothing in this car for a child," she observed coldly. "I know," I snapped, the stress fraying my patience. I reached into my pocket to find the pacifier, but instead my clumsy, shaking fingers pulled out the crumbled envelope. It fell onto the pristine leather seat between us, the red eviction stamp facing up like a bloody accusation. I froze. I reached to grab it, shame burning my face hot, but Akiko was faster. Her manicured hand snatched the paper before I could touch it. "Don't," I said, my voice cracking. "Please, give it back." She ignored me, opening the envelope with a single sharp tear. She pulled out the letter, her eyes scanning the text rapidly. 4 months past due," she read aloud, her tone devoid of judgment, stating it like a fact on a balance sheet. $1,800 a month, plus late fees. She looked up at me, the paper still in her hand. "You are being evicted on Tuesday." I looked away, staring out the window at the blurred city. The shame was a physical weight, heavier than the fear of the Yakuza. "I lost my job at the dock 6 months ago," I whispered. "The warehouse pays half, daycare costs the rest. I tried to make it work. I sold the car. I sold the TV. There's nothing left to sell." "You are drowning," she said softly. "You have $40 to your name and you are trying to raise a child in a city that eats the poor." I didn't answer. I just rocked Leo, wishing I could disappear into the upholstery. Akiko folded the letter slowly, creasing the edges with precision. She didn't give it back. Instead, she tucked it into her own coat pocket. "Driver," she said, her voice sharp. "Phone." The bodyguard in the passenger seat handed back a smartphone. Akiko unlocked it and dialed a number. "It's me," she said into the phone, switching back to English. "Likely for my benefit. The apartment building on 4th and Pike. The derelict one. Who owns the debt?" A pause. "Buy it." I whipped my head around to look at her. "Yes, the whole building," she said, her eyes boring into mine. "Tonight. Send the lawyers. And clear the tenant list of any outstanding balances. Yes, all of them. Consider it a charitable write-off." She hung up and tossed the phone back to the front seat. "What did you do?" I asked, breathless. "I solved a problem," she said, smoothing her skirt. "You cannot protect my nephew if you are sleeping under a bridge. Distractions make for poor judgment." "I can't pay you back for that," I said, my pride warring with my relief. "I can't owe you that kind of money." "You owe me nothing for the rent, Julian," she said, leaning forward, her face inches from mine again. The softness was gone. "But you owe me everything for your life. Do not mistake my generosity for kindness. It is an investment. I expect a return." The car began to slow down. We were leaving the highway, climbing a winding private road lined with tall cedar trees that blocked out the sky. A massive iron gate loomed ahead, emblazoned with a crest I didn't recognize, a stylized chrysanthemum wrapped in barbed wire. "Where are we?" I asked, the dread returning. "The Eyrie," she said. "My safe house. The only place in Seattle where the cameras don't record and the walls are lined with lead." The car stopped in front of a sprawling modernist mansion of glass and concrete, perched on a cliff edge overlooking the ocean. It looked cold, impenetrable, and terrifyingly expensive. Akiko opened her door as the vehicle came to a halt. The cold air rushed in again, but this time it smelled of pine and ozone. She stepped out, her heels clicking on the paved driveway. She didn't look back to see if I was following. She knew I would. "Bring the boy, Julian," she called out over her shoulder, her silhouette framed by the harsh security lights. "Your shift at the warehouse is over. You work for the family now." I sat there for a moment, the open door a gaping mouth waiting to swallow me. I looked down at Leo, who had finally fallen back asleep, clutching my lapel. I thought about the cold apartment, the red stamp, the hunger. And then I looked at the mansion, a fortress against the world. I unbuckled my seatbelt. I didn't know then that I would never return to my old life. I stepped out of the car and followed the Dragon Queen into the dark. The transition from the world I knew to the world Akiko owned was not merely a change in geography. It was a change in atmospheric pressure. The Escalade didn't just drive us to a house. It carried us through a dimensional tear. We passed through the wrought iron gates of the Eyrie and the city of Seattle, with its eviction notices, leaky ceilings, and constant grinding noise, ceased to exist. The driveway wound upward through a forest of ancient cedars, the headlights cutting through the mist like lightsabers. When the house finally revealed itself, it was a monolith of brutalist concrete and seamless glass, cantilevered over the dark, churning waters of the Puget Sound. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress designed by a minimalist who hated clutter and feared nothing but exposure. The car stopped in a subterranean garage that looked more like an operating theater than a place to park vehicles. The floors were polished epoxy, reflecting the harsh LED strips overhead. A phalanx of staff was waiting. They stood in two perfect lines, heads bowed, hands clasped behind their backs. They wore dark suits, indistinguishable from the guards, save for the lack of visible earpieces. "Welcome home, Oyabun," a man at the head of the line said. He was older, with silver hair cropped close to his skull and a face that looked like it had been carved from driftwood. "Kenji." Akiko acknowledged him with a curt nod as she stepped out of the car. She gestured to me. "This is Julian, and the child is Leo. They are guests of the highest order. Treat them as you would treat me." Kenji's eyes flicked to me. There was no warmth in them, only a terrifying professional assessment. He bowed, a sharp 45-degree angle. "Julian-sama, Leo-sama." Sama. The honorific felt heavy, a title I hadn't earned and couldn't afford. I hoisted Leo higher on my hip. He was awake now, blinking groggily at the bright lights. "Come," Akiko said, not waiting for us. We took an elevator up 3 floors. When the doors slid open, the sound of the ocean hit me, muffled but omnipresent, a rhythmic heartbeat beneath the floorboards. The main living space was a cavern of shadows and glass. The furniture was low, Italian, and terrified me with its price tag. Art that belonged in museums hung on the concrete walls, abstract slashes of red and black that looked disturbingly like violence frozen in time. "Kenji will show you to your quarters," Akiko said, pulling off her gloves finger by finger. "Dinner is at 8. Do not be late, and Julian—" I turned, feeling small in the vast room. "Yes?" "Do not leave the grounds. The perimeter sensors are sensitive. If you cross the line, the security team will not ask questions before they engage." She turned and walked toward a spiral staircase, her heels clicking on the floating treads. Kenji led me down a long corridor, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. The room he opened for me was larger than my entire apartment. It smelled of cedar and crisp linen. A crib, brand new, made of pale blonde wood, sat in the corner, stocked with plush toys that looked hand-stitched. "The mistress anticipated the child's needs," Kenji said, his voice gravel. "There is formula in the kitchenette, diapers in the drawer, clothes in the closet for both of you." He stepped back and closed the door, leaving me alone in the silence. I walked to the window. Below, the black ocean crashed against the jagged rocks. I was safe. My son was fed. The eviction notice was gone. I was standing in a room worth millions. And yet, as I looked at the reflection of my tired, unshaven face in the glass, I had never felt more like a prisoner. Section 2. The Child and the Dragon. The next morning, the silence of the house was broken by the squeak of rubber against wood. Leo was awake, and his energy was manic, a direct contrast to the mausoleum-like stillness of the eyrie. I found Akiko in the kitchen, a stainless steel laboratory, where a chef was silently chopping scallions. She was sitting at the island, an iPad propped open, a cup of tea steaming in her hands. She looked different. The armor of the business suit was gone, replaced by a silk robe of deep emerald green, embroidered with gold thread. Her hair was still perfect, but her face looked softer without the harsh makeup. She looked human. Leo, seeing a new person, did what Leo always did. He toddled toward her, dragging his new plush rabbit by the ear. I started to lunge forward. "Leo, no, don't bother." Akiko held up a hand, stopping me. She turned on her stool, looking down at the small boy who was currently drooling on her Italian marble floor. Leo stopped at her feet. He stared up at her, fearless. He reached out a sticky hand and touched the silk of her robe. "Pretty," he said. It was one of his 5 words. My breath hitched. I waited for her to recoil. I waited for the coldness I had seen in the car. Instead, Akiko slowly lowered herself from the stool. She crouched down, heedless of the silk pooling on the floor. She brought her face level with his. "It is silk, little one," she said, her voice dropping to a register I hadn't heard before. It was the voice of the lullaby. "From Kyoto. Do you like the feel of it?" Leo nodded vigorously. He held up the rabbit. "Bun bun." Akiko took the rabbit. She examined it with the seriousness of a diamond appraiser. "A fine bun-bun," she agreed. She handed it back, then reached into the pocket of her robe. She pulled out a small, lacquered box. "I have something better," she whispered. She opened the box. Inside was a small wooden spinning top painted with intricate red patterns. "This belonged to my brother," she said, her eyes losing focus for a second. "He died before he could grow up. It has been waiting for another boy to spin it." She spun it on the marble floor. It whirred silently, a blur of red and wood. Leo shrieked with delight and chased it. I stood in the doorway, paralyzed. The juxtaposition was jarring. The crime boss who ordered hits in a luxury SUV was currently on her knees on the kitchen floor, teaching my son how to spin a toy from a dead uncle. She looked up and caught me staring. The mask slammed back into place, but it was thinner this time. "He has her eyes," she said softly. "Emmy's eyes. But he has your chin, Julian. Stubborn." "He has your family's temper," I ventured, walking into the room. "Good," Akiko said, standing up and smoothing her robe. "He will need it. The world is not kind to lambs. We must teach him to be a wolf." She gestured to the chef. "Eat. You look like a famine victim. I cannot have my guests looking starved. It reflects poorly on my hospitality." As I sat down to a breakfast of grilled fish, miso soup, and rice, a traditional spread Emmy used to make only on New Year's, I watched Akiko watch Leo. There was a hunger in her gaze, a profound, aching loneliness that no amount of money could fill. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why are you doing all this? The house, the debt, the clothes?" Akiko took a sip of her tea. "Because you are the keeper of the song," she said, "and because he is the last of the bloodline, and you, Julian, are the only one who remembers her as a woman, not a myth." Section 3. The Ghost of Osaka. Later that afternoon, she found me in the library. It was a 2-story room lined with books in Japanese, English, and French. I was staring at a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. It was an old black-and-white picture of a stern-looking man in a kimono, holding the hands of 2 little girls. "My father," Akiko said, appearing at my elbow like a phantom, "Kenjiro Sato." "And the girls?" I asked, though I knew. "Me." She pointed to the taller one, who looked serious, even at age 7. "And Emmy." The girl in the photo was smiling, a gap-toothed, joyous grin that broke my heart. It was the same smile Leo gave me when I tickled him. "She ran away when she was 18, Akiko said, staring at the photo. "Our father. He was a great man, but he was a terrible father. He was the Oyabun of the Satogumi, the dragon of Osaka. He demanded absolute loyalty, absolute perfection. Emmy, she wanted to paint. She wanted to listen to American pop music. She suffocated here." "She never told me," I said. "She told me her father was a fisherman who died in a storm." "A storm?" Akiko laughed darkly. "A storm of bullets, perhaps. He was assassinated by the Red Dragonfly clan 3 days after Emmy left. They thought without an heir, the Sato Empire would crumble." She turned to me, her eyes blazing. "They didn't count on me. I was the scholar, the quiet one. But when they killed him, I put down my books and I picked up his sword. I held the clan together. I crushed the red dragonflies until they were dust. But Emmy was gone," Akiko's voice cracked. "I searched for her. For years. I wanted to tell her it was safe, but she hid well. She changed her name. She buried her past because she thought the life would kill her." She walked to the window, looking out at the grey sky. "And in the end, it wasn't a bullet that took her. It was her own body. The irony is hateful." I moved closer to her. The anger and fear I had felt toward her were dissolving, replaced by a shared grief that felt like a physical weight in the room. "The song," I said. "The lullaby. Why that?" "My father was paranoid," Akiko explained. "He didn't trust banks. He didn't trust computers. He moved his private fortune, billions of yen, into a series of bearer bonds and offshore accounts. The access codes. He turned them into music. The notes correspond to numbers. The lyrics are the cipher key for the sequence. He taught it to us as a game." She looked at me. "I remember the first verse. It opens the accounts. But the second verse, the one about the red dragonflies, that is the authorization key to move the funds. I forgot it. I was young and I hated his games. But Emmy had a perfect memory for music. She remembered." And she taught it to me, I realized, to soothe Leo. She gave you the keys to the kingdom, Julian, as Akiko whispered, unknowingly. And now, the remnants of the Red Dragonfly clan, they have reformed. They know the money is still out there, untouched for 30 years. They know I can't access it, and they know someone else might. She turned to me, her face pale. They are hunting for the memory of the song. If they find you, they will not ask politely. I looked at the photo of the two little girls. I understood now. I wasn't just a guest. I was a vault. And Akiko wasn't just a jailer. She was the only wall standing between my son and the wolves. Teach me, I said. Teach you what? How to survive in your world. Section 4. The Consort. The next week was a blur of transformation. The warehouse inventory manager died, and something else began to take his place. It started with the clothes. Akiko had a tailor come to the house, an older Italian man who measured my inseam without saying a word. 2 days later, my closet was filled. Charcoal suits, crisp white shirts, cashmere sweaters. Put them on, Akiko ordered. You walk like a victim. The clothes will make you walk like a man who owns the ground. She was right. The cut of the jacket changed my posture. I stood straighter. I began to shadow her. I sat in the corner of her office while she conducted video calls with Tokyo, London, and Macau. I listened to the cadence of the negotiations. One afternoon, she was on a call with a shipping magnate from Kobe. The conversation was polite, circular, frustrating. He says the delay is due to customs, Akiko muttered to herself after muting the microphone. He is lying. He's not lying about the customs, I said, speaking up from my corner. Akiko spun her chair around. Excuse me. The phrasing he used, I said, tapping into my years of logistics experience and the warehouse slang Emmy had laughed about. He said, nigh age. In shipping, that usually implies the cargo is on the dock but hasn't cleared inspection because of a paperwork error. Not a government hold, he messed up the manifest, he's embarrassed. Akiko stared at me for a long moment. Then she unmuted the microphone. Mr. Tanaka, she said in Japanese, her voice silky. Perhaps if you corrected the manifest error you made, the cargo would move? I would hate for my associates to think you are incompetent rather than just unlucky. The man on the screen went pale. He apologized profusely. The deal was closed 5 minutes later. Akiko closed the laptop. She looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her lips. It was the first time she had smiled at me with genuine approval. You have a sharp ear, Julian, she said. I moved boxes for a living, I said, shrugging. You learn the excuses. She stood up and walked over to me. She reached out and adjusted the lapel of my new suit. Her hand lingered on my chest for a fraction of a second too long. I could feel the heat of her palm through the wool. My breath hitched. You are more than a box mover, she said softly. You are dangerous. You just don't know it yet. The dynamic in the house shifted. The staff, who had been polite but distant, began to bow deeper. Kenji started asking me for my preference on the dinner menu. I realized with a jolt that they saw me not as a hostage but as a consort. I spent my evenings in the nursery with Leo, singing the song, but now I sang it with a new awareness. I was checking the lock on a vault. One night I was sitting on the terrace watching the rain lash against the glass. Akiko came out, holding 2 tumblers of whiskey. She handed one to me and stood beside me. Her shoulder brushed against my arm. I didn't pull away. It is strange, she said, looking at our reflection in the dark glass. To have a man in this house who does not work for me, who does not fear me. I fear you, I admitted. No, she turned to face me. You fear for Leo, that is different. You challenge me, Julian. Emmy would have liked that. The mention of Emmy usually brought a wall of grief, but tonight it felt like a bridge. She missed you, I said. She never said it, but I know she did. She used to talk about a shadow sister in her dreams. Akiko's eyes shone with unshed tears. She reached out and brushed a stray hair from my forehead. Her fingers were cool, trembling slightly. I am tired of being a shadow, she whispered. For a moment the air between us crackled with a confusing, terrifying electricity. I looked at her lips, painted a dark plum, and felt a pull so strong it frightened me. I wasn't betraying Emmy. I was finding the piece of her that had been missing. Section 5. The Black Lotus. The bubble burst on a Tuesday, 10 days after I arrived. We were in the library. I was reading a book on Japanese history Akiko had recommended. She was reviewing security logs. Suddenly Kenji burst into the room. He didn't knock. His face was a mask of grim fury. "Mistress," he barked, "we have a problem." Akiko was on her feet instantly. "Report. A package, delivered to the main gate." The sensors didn't pick up the courier until he was already gone. Kenji placed a small wooden box on the desk. It was wrapped in black cloth. Pinned to the top was a dried flower, a red dragonfly. Akiko's face went white. She stared at the insect, as if it were a radioactive isotope. "Don't touch it," she ordered. She pulled a pair of latex gloves from a drawer and carefully unwrapped the cloth. Inside the box was a photograph. It was a picture of me, taken yesterday. I was standing on the terrace looking out at the ocean. The crosshairs of a long-range scope were drawn over my chest in red marker, and underneath the photo was a single line of text, written in elegant, jagged kanji, "Sing for us, bird, or we break the cage." My blood ran cold. "They found us, how? You said this place was a fortress." "A drone," Akiko hissed, her eyes scanning the photo. "High altitude, oceanside. They bypassed the thermal sensors by coming in over the water during the storm." She looked up at me and the softness of the last week evaporated. The dragon was back. "Kenji," she commanded. "Initiate Protocol 0, lockdown, shut the shutters. Jam all outgoing signals, get the boy to the vault." "Yes, Oyabun." Kenji moved with terrifying speed. Akiko rounded the desk and grabbed my arm. Her grip was bruising. "You do not leave my sight. Do you understand? Not for a second." "They know I'm here," I stammered. "They know who I am." "They know you are the key," she said, pulling me toward the safe room hidden behind a bookcase. "And now they have declared war. I will burn this city to the ground before I let them touch you." The fear in her voice wasn't for herself. It was for me. And in that moment, seeing the ferocious protectiveness in her eyes, the line between captor and savior blurred until it vanished completely. Section 6. The silence between notes. The safe room was a bunker disguised as a luxury lounge. No windows. Air filtration systems humming. A wall of monitors showing the perimeter of the estate, now bathed in the eerie green glow of night vision. Leo was asleep in a portable crib in the corner, blissfully unaware that armies were mobilizing for his father's memory. It was 3:00 a.m. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a jittery exhaustion. Akiko was pacing, a glass of scotch in her hand. She had stripped off her blazer, pacing in a silk camisole and trousers, a shoulder holster strapped over the delicate fabric. The gun looked jarringly out of place, yet perfectly natural on her. "Sit down, Akiko," I said. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor." She stopped. She looked at me, her eyes wild. "I failed her," she whispered. "I failed Emmy. I let her run. I let her die alone. I will not fail you. I will not let them take the last piece of her I have." "You haven't failed anyone," I said, standing up. I walked over to her. I took the glass from her hand and set it on the table. I took her hands in mine. They were ice cold. "Look at me," I said. She looked up. Her eyes were dark pools of panic and rage. "We are safer," I said. "You built a fortress. You are the dragon of Osaka. You told me so." "I am just a woman," she breathed, her voice trembling. "A woman who is tired of fighting alone." "You're not alone," I said. The words tumbled out before I could check them. "I'm here." She stared at me, her chest heaving. The distance between us closed. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was gravity. "Julian," she whispered. It was a plea. She leaned in. I could smell the jasmine and the scotch. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. My hands moved up her arms to her shoulders. Her hands gripped the lapels of my jacket. Her lips parted. Her eyes fluttered shut. I wanted to kiss her. I wanted to lose myself in the power and the pain of her. I wanted to forget the eviction notices and the cancer and the warehouse. But then, over the hum of the air filter, I heard a small sound, a soft, sleepy whimper from the crib. Leo. The sound was like a bucket of ice water. I froze. I pulled back, stumbling slightly. Akiko's eyes snapped open. She looked confused, then hurt, then horrified. I stammered, stepping back. I can't. Not with him right there. Not with her memory. I couldn't finish the sentence. Not with Emmy's ghost in the room. Akiko straightened her spine. The mask slid back into place, but it was cracked. She looked at me with a profound sadness. "You are a good man, Julian," she said softly. "Too good for this world. And certainly too good for me." She turned away, walking to the wall of monitors. "You are right, it was a mistake. The stress, it confuses things." "It's not that I don't," I started, desperate to explain that the attraction was real, that it was terrifyingly real. "Do not," though she cut me off, her voice sharp. "Do not say it. Let us keep the lie. It is safer." She stared at the screens, her back to me. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we go to war. Ending the flight." I didn't sleep. I watched the monitors. I watched the green ghosts of the cedar trees swaying in the wind. I watched Akiko dozing fitfully in the armchair, her hand resting on her holster. At 6:00 a.m. the phone on the wall buzzed. A red light flashed. Akiko was awake instantly. She grabbed the receiver. "Report," she said. She listened for 10 seconds. Her face went hard. "Understood. Execute. We are moving." She hung up and turned to me. "Wake the boy. We have 5 minutes." "What happened?" I asked, grabbing the diaper bag Kenji had packed. "They didn't just find us," she said, checking the magazine of her pistol. "They bought the security firm that monitors the perimeter. The sensors are down. They are coming up the driveway." "Who?" "The Red Dragonflies, and a mercenary team from Russia." She grabbed a heavy duffel bag from under the desk. She threw it to me. "Bulletproof vests. Put one on yourself. Put the small one on Leo." My hands shook as I strapped the Kevlar vest onto my confused, crying son. "Where are we going?" "The roof," she said. "The helicopter is inbound." We burst out of the safe room back into the library. The morning light was grey and cold. I could hear it now, the sound of engines, not the smooth hum of the Escalade, but the roar of trucks. Gunfire erupted near the main gate, a dry, popping sound like firecrackers. "Kenji is holding the road," Akiko said, pushing me toward the stairs. "Run!" We sprinted up the spiral staircase to the roof access. The wind up there was brutal, whipping rain into our faces. In the distance, coming over the water, I saw a black shape, a helicopter flying low and fast. "Is that yours?" I yelled over the wind. "Yes," she yelled back. She grabbed my hand, interlacing her fingers with mine. Her grip was iron. Below us, I heard the crash of glass. They were in the house. Akiko looked at me. Her hair was wild, her eyes fierce. She didn't look like a crime boss, she looked like a Valkyrie. "Trust me, Julian," she shouted. "Whatever happens next, do not let go of my hand." I looked at the approaching chopper, then down at the driveway where black-clad figures were swarming over Kenji's position. I looked at my son, strapped to my chest, and then at the woman who was willing to burn the world to save him. I squeezed her hand back. "I'm with you," I said, "all the way." As the helicopter flared for a landing, kicking up a spray of water and noise, I knew the old Julian was dead. The man who worried about rent was gone. In his place was something else, something harder. We jumped into the bird, and as we lifted off, leaving the Airy behind, I realized I wasn't leaving the danger. I was flying straight into the heart of it. The helicopter ride was a blur of grey water and terrifying noise. Akiko sat opposite me, her knees knocking against mine, her weapon drawn and resting on her thigh. She wasn't looking at me, she was scanning the horizon, her eyes darting like a predator's. Leo was strapped to my chest in the carrier, the oversized Kevlar vest making him look like a tiny, confused astronaut. He had stopped crying, lulled into a stunned silence by the vibration of the rotors. We descended toward a private airfield in Tacoma, a desolate stretch of cracked concrete surrounded by rusting shipping containers. It looked abandoned. It looked like a grave. "When we land," Akiko shouted over the roar of the engine, "you run for the hangar. Do not stop. Do not look back." "What about you?" I yelled back. "I am the distraction," she said grimly. The skids hit the tarmac with a bone-jarring thud. The pilot, a man Akiko had trusted for 10 years, turned around. I expected him to give the thumbs up. Instead, he pulled a suppressed pistol from his jacket and leveled it at Akiko's chest. "I'm sorry, Oyabun," the pilot said, his voice flat. "They have my family." Time seemed to warp. I saw Akiko's eyes widen, not with fear, but with the calculation of a computer processing an error. "Get down," she screamed. I threw myself over Leo just as the windshield shattered. But the bullet didn't come from outside. Akiko had fired first. The pilot slumped forward, dead before his finger could tighten on the trigger. The helicopter lurched violently as his body fell onto the collective stick. "Out!" Akiko roared, kicking the door open. "Move, Julian, now!" I scrambled out of the cabin, the smell of cordite and aviation fuel choking me. The airfield wasn't empty. 3 black SUVs were racing toward us, tires screeching on the wet pavement. Men were hanging out of the windows, weapons trained on the helicopter. "Go!" Akiko shoved me toward the gap between 2 massive shipping containers. "Get behind cover." I ran. I sprinted with a speed born of pure primal terror, clutching Leo's head to my chest. Bullets sparked against the concrete around my feet, angry hornet buzzes that promised death. I dove behind a rusted red container, gasping for air, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. "Akiko!" I screamed, looking back. She wasn't running. She was standing by the helicopter, using the fuselage as a shield, returning fire with a calm, terrifying precision. She dropped one man, then another. But there were too many of them. And then a voice boomed over a loudspeaker, cutting through the chaos. "Cease fire, do not damage the asset." The gunfire stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, wet, and suffocating. "Come out, Akiko," the voice sneered. It was smooth, arrogant, and accented. "And bring the singer. We have much to discuss about old debts." I peeked around the corner. A man had stepped out of the lead SUV. He was young, handsome in a jagged sort of way, wearing a white trench coat that remained impossibly clean amidst the grime. He held a cane, though he didn't seem to need it. Akiko stepped out from behind the helicopter. She looked small against the backdrop of the grey sky, but her posture was monumental. "Tetsuo," she spat. "I should have drowned you in the Dotonbori River when I had the chance." Section 2. The Viper. Tetsuo laughed, a dry, rattling sound. He walked toward her, flanked by 4 heavy-set men with assault rifles. "You always were sentimental, cousin," Tetsuo said. "That was your weakness. Emi's weakness, too." He stopped 10 feet from her. "Where is he? The American pet? Bring him out, or I will have my men burn these containers one by one until he cooks." Akiko didn't flinch. "He is gone. You are too late." "Liar," Tetsuo hissed. He signaled to his men. "Find him." 2 guards started moving toward the containers, toward me. I looked at Leo. He was staring up at me, his eyes wide and trusting. If I stayed hidden, they would find us. If they found us, they would use Leo to break her. I made a choice. "I'm here," I shouted, stepping out from behind the rusted steel. "Julian, no!" Akiko's scream was raw, stripping away her composure. Tetsuo turned, his eyes lighting up with predatory delight. "Ah, the widower, the keeper of the keys." He looked me up and down, sneering at my disheveled suit and the baby strapped to my chest. This is what she threw her life away for, a warehouse clerk. "Let them go, Tetsuo," Akiko said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous vibration. "This is between us. Family business." "He is family business now," Tetsuo countered. He raised his hand, and his men trained their weapons on me. "Come here, Julian, sing for me the second verse. Do it, and I might let the boy live." "Don't do it, Julian," Akiko commanded. "He will kill you both the moment he has the code." "Silence her," Tetsuo ordered casually. One of the guards swung the butt of his rifle, striking Akiko across the temple. She crumbled to the pavement, blood spraying onto the wet asphalt. "Akiko!" I lunged forward, forgetting the guns, forgetting everything but the sight of her falling. "Stop!" Tetsuo pointed his cane at Leo. "Another step and the child dies." I froze. The world narrowed down to the silver tip of that cane pointing at my son. "Good," Tetsuo purred. He walked over to Akiko, who was struggling to her knees, blood streaming down her face. He grabbed her hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look at me. "Look at him, Akiko," Tetsuo taunted. "Your weakness. You thought you could play mother. You are a killer. You destroy everything you touch." He looked at me. "Sing. Now. Nenen kororiyo." I looked at Akiko. Her eyes were swimming, but she shook her head slightly. "No." "I don't know it," I lied, my voice shaking. "I only know the first verse." Tetsuo sighed. "Disappointing." He pulled a pistol from his coat. "Maybe if I shoot the woman, your memory will improve." He pressed the barrel against Akiko's forehead. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't bravery. It was the cornered rat instinct Akiko had talked about. "Wait!" I shouted. "I'll do it. Just let her go." Tetsuo smiled. "See? Love makes us stupid." He looked down at Akiko. "Any last words, cousin?" Akiko looked up. The dazed look vanished from her eyes, replaced by a cold absolute zero fury. "Yes," she whispered in Japanese. "Kireni." Cleanly. It happened in a blur. Akiko didn't try to push the gun away. She dropped. She let gravity take her, falling flat to the ground. As Tetsuo fired, the bullet whistled harmlessly over her head. From her prone position, she kicked upward. Her heel connected with Tetsuo's knee with a sickening crunch. He screamed, his leg bending the wrong way. As he fell, Akiko rolled, grabbing the knife hidden in her boot. She didn't stand up. She sprang from the ground like a coiled spring, driving the blade upward. She didn't stab him in the chest. She slashed his throat, a single surgical cut. Tetsuo gurgled, clutching his neck, blood pouring over his white coat. He collapsed, gasping. The guards were stunned for a fraction of a second, the moment it took to process that their boss was dead. "Julian, down!" Akiko screamed. I dropped to the concrete, curling around Leo. Akiko didn't run for cover. She grabbed Tetsuo's fallen pistol and opened fire. She was a demon. A blur of motion and violence, she shot the first guard in the throat, the second in the chest. She moved with a fluidity that was beautiful and terrifying. Click. Her gun was empty. 2 guards remained. They raised their rifles. I looked around. There was a loose metal pipe near my hand. I grabbed it. I didn't think. I threw it as hard as I could at the nearest guard. It hit him in the face. It didn't kill him, but it made him flinch. That second was all Akiko needed. She closed the distance, tackling him, using his body as a shield as the last guard fired. The man she held jerked as his partner's bullets hit him. Akiko snapped his neck and fired his weapon, dropping the last man. Silence returned to the airfield. Akiko stood amidst the bodies, her chest heaving, blood dripping from her hairline, a knife in one hand and a gun in the other. She looked at Tetsuo's corpse, then at me. "I told you," she rasped, wiping blood from her eyes. "Touch him and you don't leave alive." Section 3. The Scars We Keep. We didn't stay to check the pockets. We ran for the hangar. Inside, a small business jet was waiting. Her backup plan's backup plan. But we didn't board immediately. We collapsed in the small pilot's lounge attached to the hangar, locking the heavy steel door behind us. The room was dim, lit only by emergency strips. I unstrapped Leo, checking him frantically. He was wailing now, terrified by the noise, but he was unharmed. I set him in the corner on a pile of flight jackets and turned to Akiko. She was leaning against the sink in the small kitchenette, gripping the porcelain so hard her knuckles were white. The cut on her temple was deep, bleeding freely onto her silk camisole. "You're hurt," I said, my voice trembling as the adrenaline crashed. "It is nothing," she said, but her voice was weak. She swayed. I rushed to her, catching her before she hit the floor. I hoisted her onto the counter. "Sit. Let me see." I grabbed a first aid kit from the wall. My hands were shaking, covered in grime and the phantom sensation of the metal pipe I had thrown. I cleaned the wound on her head. She hissed, her eyes scrunching shut. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry." "Why are you apologizing?" she asked, opening her eyes. They were dark, dilated and stripped of all defenses. You saved my life. That pipe. It was foolish, but effective. I thought he was going to kill you, I said, applying a butterfly bandage. I couldn't watch. Tetsuo was right, she murmured, leaning into my touch as I cleaned the blood from her cheek. I am a destroyer. I brought this to your door. I put Leo in front of a gun. You put yourself between the gun and him, I corrected her. You took the hit. I have killed for less, Julian, she confessed, her voice cracking. I have burned down companies and ruined lives for insults, but today, when he pointed that cane at the boy, I felt fear, real fear, not for my empire, for you. She looked up at me, and the vulnerability on her face broke me. The dragon was gone. This was just Akiko, a woman who had been fighting a war alone for 30 years. I can't let you go, she whispered, a tear mixing with the blood on her face. I tried to push you away in the safe room. I tried to be noble, but I am selfish. I want you. Akiko, I breathed. I am covered in blood, she said, looking down at her ruined clothes. I am a monster. No, I said, cupping her face in my hands. You're the woman who remembered a lullaby about dragonflies. I realized then that we had crossed a line. There was no going back to the warehouse, no going back to the quiet grief of my apartment. I had seen violence, and I had participated in it. I was part of her world now. Section 4. Gravity. The air in the room shifted. The smell of blood and antiseptic faded, replaced by the scent of jasmine and sweat and raw electric need. Julian, she said, her voice a plea. I didn't hesitate this time. I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It tasted of copper and salt. Her lips were soft, but her response was fierce. She wrapped her arms around my neck, pulling me closer, as if she were trying to merge our bodies to stop the shaking. I groaned, burying my hands in her hair, careful of the wound. I traced the line of her jaw, the scar on her neck I hadn't noticed before, the pulse hammering in her throat. We moved together with a desperation born of survival. We were two people who had just stared into the abyss and pulled each other back. You're mine, she whispered against my mouth. I won't let them touch you again. I'm yours, I answered. She pulled back slightly, her forehead resting against mine. We were both breathing hard. Her hands were gripping my shirt, anchoring her to the earth. This changes everything, she said. If we do this, there is no guest anymore. You become a target forever. I'm already a target, I said, brushing my thumb over her lips. I might as well be a target with the woman I love. The word hung in the air. Love. I hadn't meant to say it. It felt too soon, too crazy. But looking at her, fierce and broken and beautiful, I knew it was true. It wasn't the gentle, quiet love I had for Emmy. This was a storm. Akiko closed her eyes, a shudder running through her. You are a fool, Julian. Probably, I agreed, kissing her forehead. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the dim light of the pilot's lounge while the sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Section 5. The Impossible Choice. The sound of sirens broke the spell. Akiko pulled away, the mask sliding back into place, though it didn't fit quite as tightly as before. She hopped off the counter, wincing slightly. The police are coming, she said. Tetsuo's men are dead. But the authorities will ask questions I cannot answer. She walked to the window and looked out at the jet. The plane is fueled. The pilot is gone, but I can fly it. I have a license. She turned to me. Her face was serious, the softness gone. Julian, listen to me. I can take you to New Zealand. I have a safe house there, a farm. It is off the grid. I can set up a trust for Leo. You will never have to work again. You will be safe. I frowned. We? You mean we will be safe? She shook her head. No, I cannot go. Tetsuo was just a lieutenant. The Red Dragonfly clan will not stop because he is dead. They will come for the money with renewed force. I have to go to Tokyo. I have to finish this war. If I stay with you, I bring the war to the farm. She stepped closer, placing a hand on my chest. Go to New Zealand, raise your son. Forget about the song, forget about me. It is the only way to guarantee his safety. I looked at her. I saw the pain in her eyes. She was breaking her own heart to save mine. I looked at Leo, sleeping on the jackets. A farm in New Zealand, safety, peace, no guns, no blood. Then I looked at Akiko. If she went to Tokyo alone, she would die. She was outnumbered. She needed the money to buy loyalty, to buy weapons, to dismantle the clan, and she couldn't access the money without me. If I left, I was sentencing her to death. I thought about Emmy. She had run away to protect herself, and she had died with secrets. I was done with secrets. I was done running. No, I said. Akiko blinked. Julian, be rational. Think of the boy. I am thinking of him, I said, my voice steady. I'm thinking that if his father runs away, he teaches his son to be a coward. I'm thinking that if I leave you to die, I'll never forgive myself. I took her hand. The song needs 2 verses to work, right? The melody and the words. You're the melody, Akiko. I'm the words. You can't do this without me. It is suicide, she argued, though her hand tightened on mine. Tokyo is a viper's nest. Then we buy some mongoose, I said, a grim smile touching my lips. I'm not going to New Zealand. I'm going to Tokyo with you. We unlock the funds. We crush the dragonflies. And then we talk about the farm. She stared at me, searching for any sign of hesitation. She found none. You are stubborn, she whispered, a mixture of relief and terror washing over her face. I told you, I said. It's the chin. Section 6. The Departure. We have to go, Akiko said, grabbing the duffel bag. Now. I picked up Leo, strapping him back into the carrier. He grumbled but settled against my chest. I grabbed the flight jackets and followed Akiko out the door. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet asphalt and death. We ran to the jet, the sound of police sirens screaming at the chain-link fence at the perimeter. Akiko jumped into the cockpit. I strapped Leo into a seat in the back and moved to the co-pilot's chair. Do you know how to use the radio? She asked, flipping switches with practiced ease. The engines whined to life. No, I said. Learn fast, she said, pushing the throttle forward. The jet taxied onto the runway. The police cruisers burst through the gate, lights flashing, racing toward us. Hold on, Akiko yelled. She pulled back on the yoke. The jet roared, picking up speed. We lifted off just as the cruisers skidded onto the tarmac beneath us. We climbed sharply, banking over the grey water of the Puget Sound, turning west, toward the ocean, toward Japan. I looked down at the shrinking city of Seattle. My old life was down there somewhere. The unpaid bills, the damp apartment, the grief. It was all getting smaller, disappearing into the clouds. I looked at Akiko. Her profile was sharp against the darkening sky, her jaw set in determination. She reached over and took my hand, intertwining our fingers on the center console. There is no turning back now, Julian, she said. I know, I answered, squeezing her hand. Fly. Tomorrow we would land in the heart of the enemy's territory. Tomorrow everything would change. But for tonight, we were flying above the storm. The sun rising over Tokyo was different from the sun in Seattle. It was sharper, piercing through the smog and the neon with a relentless, demanding clarity. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse in Minato-ku, watching the sprawling mechanical city wake up. The air smelled of ozone, grilled eel, and money. Inside, the room was silent. Akiko was still asleep, her dark hair fanned out over the white silk pillow like ink spilled on snow. It was a rare sight, the Dragon of Osaka, vulnerable, her defenses lowered by exhaustion and the safety of her own territory. I walked back inside, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of my footsteps. I picked up the 2 ceramic cups of coffee I had brewed, strong, black, the way she liked it now that I knew her. I sat on the edge of the bed. Akiko stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, instantly alert, before softening as they landed on me. You are awake, she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. "I couldn't sleep," I said, handing her a cup. "Today is the day." She sat up, the sheet pooling at her waist. She took the coffee, her fingers brushing mine. "Are you afraid?" "No," I said, and I was surprised to find it was the truth. "I'm ready." I stood up and walked to the closet, a walk-in expanse filled with the wardrobe she had ordered for me before we even landed. I pulled out a dark navy suit. It wasn't just clothing anymore, it was armor. As I buttoned the shirt, I watched her in the mirror. She was watching me, a small satisfied smile playing on her lips. "You wear the skin of a wolf well, Julian," she said. "I learned from the best," I replied. I walked over to the crib where Leo was sleeping. He had adjusted to the time zone better than we had. He looked peaceful, surrounded by new toys that Kenji had procured within an hour of our arrival. "The bank opens at 9, Akiko said, her tone shifting from domestic to strategic. "The vault is biometric. It requires my retina and your voice." The specific cadence of the second verse, "If you miss a note." "I won't miss," I promised. I turned to her. "And after that?" "After that," she said, setting her cup down and rising from the bed, the steel returning to her spine, "we buy a war, and then we end it." I helped her with the zipper of her dress, a severe, beautiful black sheath. My hands lingered on her waist. We stood there for a moment, a tableau of quiet power. The warehouse clerk and the Yakuza boss preparing to burn the old world down to build a new one. "Let's go," I said. "The song has waited 30 years. Section 2. The Silent War. The vault of the Mitsui private bank was a cathedral of silence. It was 3 stories underground, the air recycled and cool. The bank manager, a man who sweated profusely despite the temperature, left us alone at the massive circular door. Akiko stepped forward first. She placed her eye against the scanner. A red laser mapped her retina. A heavy thud echoed through the concrete as the first tumbler engaged. Then a microphone extended from the wall. A small green light blinked. I stepped up. I closed my eyes. I didn't think about the billions of yen. I didn't think about the red dragonflies hunting us. I thought of the park in Seattle. I thought of Emmy, humming in the kitchen while she chopped vegetables. I thought of the damp smell of her hair. I opened my mouth and sang, "Tombo no Megan wa Mizuiro Megan." My voice was steady, resonating in the steel chamber. I hit the low notes, the specific melancholic dip that Emmy had taught me, the flaw that was actually the key. The dragonfly's glasses are blue glasses. Silence. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. I felt a spike of panic. Had I remembered it wrong? Then a chime sounded, sweet and pure. The massive steel bolts retracted with the groan of waking giants. The door swung open. Inside, there were no stacks of cash, just a single computer terminal and a wall of bearer bonds. Akiko walked in. She didn't look triumphant. She looked efficient. She sat at the terminal, her fingers flying across the keys. "The funds are active," she said, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. "Initiating transfer." The war that followed wasn't fought in the streets. There were no gunfights in alleys, no car chases. It was a war of logistics, funded by the ghost of Kenjiro Sato. 6 weeks later, the news broke quietly. The headlines didn't mention the Yakuza. They mentioned a series of corporate restructuring events. A shipping conglomerate in Kobe, a front for the red dragonflies, was seized by government regulators for tax fraud. A chain of hostess bars in Roppongi was shut down for health code violations. And then the body count. Antonio Russo, the mercenary liaison, was found in a container ship in Yokohama. He hadn't been shot. He had suffocated. A tragic accident. The head of the Red Dragonfly clan, an old man named Tanaka, who had ordered the hit on us, simply vanished. He walked out of his house to buy cigarettes and never returned. Rumor had it he had retired to a monastery, or the bottom of Tokyo Bay. I was in Akiko's office when the final report came in. Kenji placed a tablet on the desk. "It is done, Oyabun," he said. "The red dragonflies are insolvent. Their leadership is absent. The territories have been absorbed." Akiko looked at the screen. She didn't smile. She just nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders that had been there for decades. "And the police?" she asked. "Paid?" Kenji said. "The Seattle incident is officially a closed case, a dispute between foreign nationals, no extradition." She looked at me. "It is over." I looked out the window at the Tokyo skyline. I should have felt guilty. I had helped finance the destruction of an entire organization. I had been complicit in violence, however indirect, but as I thought of Tetsuo pointing a cane at my son, I felt nothing but a cold, hard relief. "Good," I said. "Now we can live." Section 3. The consort's rise integration into Akiko's world was not a splash, it was a deepening. I didn't become a gangster. I didn't get tattoos or carry a sword. That wasn't my role. I became the bridge. With the Satogumi legitimized and expanding into international logistics, my background in warehouse inventory, once a source of shame, became a tactical asset. I understood the supply chains, I understood the American market, I took over the legitimate shipping arm of the family business. I wore suits that cost more than my old annual salary, and I sat in boardrooms negotiating with men who terrified me only months ago. They respected me, not because I was frightening, but because I stood next to her. They called me Sato-san now, adopting me into the name. I was the consort, the one who had walked through fire with the dragon. Leo thrived. We enrolled him in an international school in Hiru. He was speaking Japanese with a fluency that already outstripped mine, mixing it with English in a chaotic, happy pidgin. He had a nanny, a security detail, and a grandmother figure in Akiko's head housekeeper, who spoiled him with bean cakes. Our life was a study in contrasts. In the mornings, I took Leo to school in an armored sedan. In the afternoons, I reviewed shipping manifests for cargo that was 90% legal and 10% grey. In the evenings, I came home to the fortress in Minato-ku. One evening, 3 months in, I came home to find the living room transformed. Akiko had hired a private chef to make burgers, American cheeseburgers. "I thought you might be homesick," she said, watching me eyeing the plate. "I'm not," I said, loosening my tie. "But I appreciate the gesture." I looked around the room. It was filled with art, with warmth, with the noise of Leo playing with a robotic dog. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. I had purpose. The fear that had defined my life in Seattle, the fear of poverty, of failure, of the final notice, was gone, replaced by a different kind of tension. The tension of holding power. I walked over to Akiko, who was reading a report on the sofa. I kissed the top of her head. "Thank you," I said. "For the burger?" she asked, amused. "For the life," I said. "For saving us." She put the report down and pulled me down next to her. "You saved yourself, Julian. I just opened the door." Section 4. The Ghost in the Lantern. It was late summer when we finally found true peace, the Obon Festival, the time when the spirits of the ancestors returned to the world of the living. We traveled to Kyoto, to the family's ancestral estate. It was a traditional wooden house surrounded by bamboo forests and moss gardens. The air was thick with the sound of cicadas. That night, we went down to the river. The water was black and glassy, reflecting the thousands of paper lanterns floating downstream, each one carrying a soul back to the afterlife. We had bought a lantern, a large one, made of white paper and bamboo. Akiko handed me a brush and ink. "You should write her name." My hand trembled slightly as I painted the kanji for Emmy. We lit the candle inside. The paper glowed with a warm, amber light. Together, we waded into the shallow water, the cool river rushing over our feet. We set the lantern on the surface. "Go in peace, little sister," Akiko whispered. "We are okay now." We watched it drift away, joining the river of light, bobbing and weaving until it was just one spark among thousands. "She would be happy," I said quietly, "to see us, to see Leo." "She would be laughing," Akiko corrected, a sad smile on her face. "She would say that I finally found someone who could handle me." She turned to me, the light from the lanterns illuminating the sharp angles of her face, softening them. "We are not a fairy tale, Julian," she said. "We are built on blood and stolen money. We are criminals, We are survivors, I said. I love you, she said. The words were simple, spoken without fanfare, but they hit me harder than a bullet. It was the first time she had said it aloud since the pilot's lounge. I love you, Akiko, I replied. She reached up and touched my cheek. Do you miss it? The quiet life. This is my life, I said. I don't want quiet, I want you. We stood in the river for a long time, holding each other, watching the lights fade into the dark, making peace with the ghost that had brought us together. Section 5. The Empire of Two 1 year later. The ballroom of the Mandarin Oriental Tokyo was filled with the elite of Japan. Politicians, captains of industry, celebrities. The air glittered with diamonds and champagne. I stood near the balcony doors, adjusting the cuffs of my tuxedo. I felt a tug on my pant leg. Papa, up, Leo commanded. He was 3 now, wearing a miniature tuxedo that cost more than my old car. I scooped him up. You have to be quiet during the speeches, Leo. No, he said firmly. He is definitely a Sato, a voice said beside me. Akiko stepped into the light. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue, the same color as the coat she wore the night we met. She looked regal, terrifying, and breathtaking. Are you ready? She asked. Always, I said. The Prime Minister is asking for you, she said, straightening Leo's tie. He wants to discuss the new trade route to Osaka. Let him wait, I said. I'm talking to my son. Akiko smiled, a genuine, unrestrained smile that reached her eyes. She leaned in and kissed me, ignoring the hundreds of people watching, ignoring the whispers. You have become arrogant, she teased. I'm just confident, I countered. We walked back into the ballroom together, a united front. The crowd parted for us. I saw the respect in their eyes, and the fear. We were the power couple of the Tokyo underworld, untouchable, unbreakable.